discussing about the UN, youth, and the rule of law, I am extremely happy to welcome everyone to the closing ceremony of the MUNers Cross Borders 2023 Summit. And what better a way to close it than by talking to some of the people who have been youth at the UN, who have been pushing for the understanding of youth voices, and also generally just trying to get some more diversity in there than former UN youth delegates, current UN youth delegates, and people who've been working to really make an impact through MUN. And with that, I could not imagine a better cast of people to discuss it. So with me today, I have Bichana joining from Sweden as the current UN youth delegate. Thank you very much for joining us. I have Matthew O from MUN Impact. Thank you very much for joining us again for the second year. I have Trasa joining all the way from Fiji. I honestly cannot thank you enough. From Sunday, I might add as well. So from the future, we have her, former UN Youth Delegate for Ireland and currently working at the UN Coordinator's Office in Fiji. And we have Miriam and Marvin joining from Austria as the two UN Youth Delegates there. So this closing ceremony is titled, very optimistically, I like to imagine, what can youth do? We've come very far since the origins of the UN and indeed MUN 80 years ago. But what can we do more? How is the system working for now? And let's try and find some things that we can really come away with enthusiasm and excitement. So on that initial question, and we'll have more coming up. And if you have any, please put them in the chat or put them in YouTube or put them on Facebook, and we'll make sure to get them across. So Bitanya, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. So yes, as you already know, I'm Bitanya. I am the Swedish UN delegate to the HLPF, and I am very new to my role. I just started in January, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. And now, if I got it right, the question is, what can youth do, right? And how is the system working? I mean, I think we all know that youth can do a lot. And I think there's a great kind of like expertise in youth, and we always get the label of being the future, and that's why we should be included. But I also think we should be included since we do have expertise. And what an average youth can do, it can be quite frightening to just apply to be a UN delegate. What I would say is just try to get involved locally, try to find what's closest to your heart, what do I really care about, and find a local organization who lobbies that and work for them, or start a book club, start discussions, talk to people. And yeah, that's something everyone can do. And then I think once you get comfortable in your voice and that you notice that you can make a difference, people will listen to you. I think that will give you more confidence to just seek for these higher roles and talk to this like big politicians and people and stuff. Yeah. Should I get on with how the system is working, or maybe should I pass the first question?
Maybe we'll leave it there and we'll get onto that in the next round. But thank you very much for opening words. And I think it's a very, very good point. Just do it, just try and get something there. It could be, as you say, a book club. It can be the next future. Doesn't matter what it is, just try and do it. And I think, Matthew, this leads very much onto you. You have been doing many things. Your background's full of many things that you've done on Impact. What are some of the things that youth can do from your perspective, and how have they settled? How have they worked and impacted really the world around you?
Absolutely. Happy to jump on here. So hi, everyone. I'm Matthew, and just some context, I'm not a UN youth delegate. I am the Secretary General Emeritus at a student-led organization called MUN Impact, and I'm actually under 18. I'm still a high school senior hailing from Austin, Texas in the US. So I'm hoping my message today can be a little more tailored towards the under 18 crowd, because I'm sure that a lot of meaningful effort has been made by the UN and just multilateral organizations to include people, youth over 18 meaningfully, and we're very appreciative of that. But I think for a lot of us in the under 18 crowd, there are a lot of opportunities which we're not aware of, or we just have yet to forge our way into those spaces and present ourselves meaningfully. So just to address the main question that you've asked about what we can do, my biggest recommendation, and I know there are a lot of platitudes where we say youth are the future, youth can do so many great things, but to put it into concrete perspective, speaking as someone who has walked that path from being like a volunteer in late middle to early high school to where I am now as a senior, I really encourage individuals to, number one, find a domain which they are passionate about. That authenticity is absolutely critical. So whether you're passionate about the environment, food science, human rights, make sure, have a domain which you're passionate about. And then most importantly, if you're looking to participate in spaces like the UN, within the multilateral system that you see on TV, that you read about in the news, I highly recommend looking for organizations that have UN accreditation, or if not UN affiliated organizations, to invest your time and energy into. So a great example, I was very fortunate by joining MUN Impact, which does have UN accreditation, and I was able to work in that organization and gain experience to where I have opportunities to be here today, for example. So that's one way. Another great organization I know of, Youngo. I'm sure a bunch of everyone here is familiar with Youngo. It's a very decentralized network, all based on consensus building. And it's a way to kind of get directly involved with the UN. So that's also another great avenue for people under 18 to take. And the most important thing is, as you work your way through whatever organization you choose to join that has UN accreditation or affiliation, the most important thing is to stay true to yourself. Make sure you're being authentic. Make sure that whatever you sign up for, whatever project you take on, you're willing to invest time and energy and be sincere about that. And then eventually, as a natural result of your effort, opportunities to be at stakeholder consultations, conferences with people who have worked in the UN system, those opportunities will come eventually. So that is my advice to the very niche crowd of people, of change makers in the under 18 demographic. So just be aware of the opportunities, seek out organizations with UN accreditation and affiliation, and throughout that entire process, stay true to yourself. Make sure you're being authentic.
Thanks very much, Matthew. I really appreciate the sort of authenticity point of view. It's very unique. You don't hear that much, but it means a lot. There's only so much we can do. Tressa, over to you. So you were UN Youth Delegate last year. You're now working in a UN system. Maybe some reflections on that progress beyond it. Progress. That sounds like a one linear thing. On moving sort of into those systems, how do you see what youth can do?
Yes, thank you so much. So, hi everyone, I'm Tressa Cadigan. I'm the former Youth Delegate for Ireland, and now I'm working in the Residence Coordinating Office as the Climate Change Officer. And also I'm kind of the youth focal point in the office as well. Well, it's not my title, but I've kind of, I feel like you probably noticed 2 out of the 2 who've already spoken, it's all about getting involved, bringing people along. And I think in my new role, Fiji because I'm in a multi-country office, none of the countries have a youth delegate program. So I'm currently trying to work on getting more young people involved. And I think once you become a youth in this space, we're very much like a big community. I actually, hi guys, I actually haven't seen you in a while, Maria. I was you kind of get to know people through the system. And I think, from the, 2 years now that I'm kind of involved in the youth delegate sphere, I think it's very much just getting involved, bringing people along, leaving the ladder behind you. And then when you're kind of looking at getting involved in the UN, it's a very big, scary beast of a machine that has over 30 agencies and acronyms galore like you've never heard. So it can be a little bit intimidating. But I think just taking it slowly, getting involved, Britannia mentioned just honestly starting anywhere. You don't have to jump straight into the delegate role. Take it step by step, take it at your own pace. I never actually heard of Model UN, sadly, growing up, so I missed that boat. And I wish I did. I only got involved in this space when I was 19, which is probably a little bit older compared to some of my friends-ish. I joined when I was in college. I was the sporty one in secondary school. I had no more interest in this, but then I kind of rediscovered it. So in reflection, I think it's taking it at your own pace, using your own story, and just getting involved in anything, whatever your area is. And it'll slowly but surely build up.
Indeed, and it's clearly worked out. So there's nothing wrong with that. So there's no,
Nope.
we're all, I guess, youth here. But as we talked about in previous ones, you don't just have to be. There are many other ways to it. So Miriam and Marvin, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us as well. Double, two for the price of one, as it were. And I appreciate you speaking. So maybe a bit on your reflections. You're in the midst of it now. You've been working for it for a while. How do you see it panning out?
So also a warm welcome from our side. My name is Miriam, and that's my co-delegate Marvin, and we are the current youth delegates from Austria. And first of all, I want to emphasize what everyone said so far, because that was kind of bringing it together. But maybe to summarize it in our own way, we always try to say that it's really important to see the local level in youth participation. Also, if you want to get involved at the UN. Because all these resolutions, also what you maybe do in Model United Nations with negotiating, they're made on UN level. That's true, but the impact and the realization is on local level. So it's really important to, as Betania and Matthew and everyone else said, to first find your passion and get involved on local level and find your way and bring impact to your community, and then try to evolve and search, for example, as Matthew told you about, UN agencies for youth, like the Major Group for Children and Youth, or Youngo, who is very active in the climate field, and get involved there and kind of try to accelerate all the impacts everyone is bringing in their local communities to bring the voice on UN level. And I think a first good step, if you also want just to get more information, to know more about the UN, it's always nice to just also get all the newsletters of the UN Youth, of the Office of the Youth Envoy, of the Major Group for Children and Youth, of all these youth contingencies you're interested in, because it really helps. And also, I think what is also really important is to be not scared, because especially young people that are already engaged in UN spaces, they're very open. So also as a good advice, don't be scared to approach young people that are already in the spaces and ask them all the questions you may have, because they were at the same point you were, for example, at the moment a few months or years back. And yeah, I can also emphasize what the person before me said, because I, for example, wasn't knowing what Model United Nations are before I became a youth delegate. But
okay. Audio-wise, it's
Yep. Keep going. Yep, please.
Then one last point from my side would be that I think one should really focus on building collaboration. And one can in these old systems, because the spaces are so limited for young people, really quickly fall into a view and mindset that, okay, either I am able to represent young people in this regard, or it might be someone else, and then my main messages might not be able to be pulled across. And I think this is the wrong way, especially because we young people are so limited and we have so limited access. Of course, our first view and understanding and impact should be to make sure that we broaden these spaces also for a lot of other young people to join. And this, first of all, needs trust in our generation, and I think we can very well do that. I mean, our generation is one of the only ones which is able to organize an event like this fully online, where people take the time to come together, to collaborate, to build and exchange experiences, and which is fully organized for youth by youth. So that's an incredible thing. And I also believe that the trust is very well funded, because they're the only ones really experiencing and understanding the whole living reality. No decision maker can do this. And that's why we have a very important point in all of these discussions. And with this in the back of our minds, knowing that you're an expert of your own experiences, and yet you're an expert and you should be respected in this way, I think we really need to go to this all of these points and build on the collaboration within our networks. So joining MUN, joining, for example, I've been active in the Parliament, is definitely a place and space where we can come together as a network and amplify our voices.
Really fantastic. I love what you said, we are experts in our own experiences, that's a really, really important point. So now I want to focus a bit on the current spaces, the current system. We have the UN Youth Delegate System. We have the UN Youth Office, which is going to be established shortly. What are some reflections on how that's working at the moment? Are there any criticisms? Is it, and this is something that, is a fear, just a way to sideline youth into a box, or is it doing enough? So maybe, I don't know who want to speak on that first. Maybe Trassa, I might want to go to you first on this, just because you've had that experience and also you're still kind of engaged in it. And then others, please do add on to it. I'm just trying to dynamize it, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I think when you look at it, we're actually the first generation who have youth as a space, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's forever evolving. Like just before we came on, we were all chatting about the different UN youth delegate systems and how they work. It's like Ireland is about, I think, 8 years old. Some countries are brand new, are literally on their first or second year of youth delegates. Others are phenomenally amazing and futuristic and have it for the last, they're in the double digits, and we're very jealous. So I think as you work and it evolves, like this year, myself and Deandra, we're quite determined to create a kind of better and stronger handover system and a bit of a mentorship system in the youth delegate, because Ireland does 2 youth delegates each year and we swap over. So there can often be a bit of a brain drain there, and we didn't want that. So from an Irish perspective, we are evolving our system. But I think when you look at it beyond the UN youth delegate system, because we're the very, very lucky 2 or 3 in our country who get chosen every year, I do think it is working. I think, getting more women on boards, getting more young people on boards that focus on diversity is definitely increasing. I say boards, but like getting involved in different organizations. So I do think people are becoming more aware of it. Say like our parents, they didn't grow up with having young people involved in many different organizations. It would have been youth organizations, women's organizations, which that I suppose that ceiling is being broken. So I definitely think it is improving, and I think like when you look at how when you're trying to get involved in the UN, then to move on, or I suppose it's kind of always a progression. I'm in the UN through the UNV system, which is almost like an entry-level system into the UN, and it's fantastic. And I think being a youth delegate and being involved in youth organizations and different organizations, regardless of them being youth or not, will always help you, because it's experience that you can't gain in college. You can't gain it in education, no matter how hard you try. And I think Marvin mentioned earlier all about using your story. Like this all adds to your story. So when you do apply for jobs, being a UN youth delegate or being involved in the UN will only ever benefit you. And I think, because I think I might be the only UN youth delegate in my office, or of the people in my position. So I do think it's getting us into new doors, and it's making people in the different agencies or different organizations and companies aware that young people are an asset to their office and are an asset to their team. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to it.
Well, maybe I just want to go to Britannia, just because obviously Sweden has quite a long history of getting youth involved. It's I'm not sure how it is on the UN youth delegate numbers, but generally, the Youth Council has been very active. They've tried to implicate them in government policy for many years. Do you think the youth delegate system is working from your perspective, or there may be things that Sweden is doing you'd like to see more at the international level?
Yes. So, as you said, Sweden has been working with youths, and since I don't know how way back.
It's the beginning, kind of,
It's the beginning time, yeah. And to start off with, I agree with what Tressa said. I think the system is very good for just introducing this whole world of UN to young people, and also opening doors for them. And I think these kinds of summits and conferences and meetings we have is such a vital part to creating young or new leaders by practicing debating and diplomacy skills. So there's a lot of good things going on, but I can also see, even in Sweden, how the system can be better. In some aspects, you can see youth washing, where you invite youth to the table for dialogues, but sometimes you can see the inclusion of youth, but not really the influence of youth. And that could be very symbolic, and sometimes I think we need to place the accountability somewhere. Who can ensure that youths really have the influence and not only are included and can say what say what they think and believe, but is that really put in practice? I mean, of course, it's better than it used to be, but I think it can be even better. So that's something I've seen sometimes in Sweden, and especially when, if we just go back to COVID, as soon as a crisis hits, the politicians and the government listens to maybe the experts, and then they forget to invite the youth and see what they want to hear. So that's something I really thought about back during the COVID, or it's still COVID, but back when the pandemic was really, really bad and new. And then if I could say one other thing, it's just that there's like some kind of discrepancy, what I've seen when it comes to the representation of different youth delegates around the world. I mean, I think there's a lot of youth delegates everywhere, but as I said, like Sweden has been very good at coming up with youth delegates, and I think generally in the global north we've been very good, but then it's not that many from the global south perhaps, and that's something that we could, I think, really see it could be a better improvement when it comes to the global UN delegate system. So there are some very good things, but I think there's also some places where we can see improvements, definitely.
Some progress. No, I agree. Mira and Marvin, going to you, and believe me, Matthew, you and I will have a chance to rat on the system in a second. But Mira and Marvin, obviously, I don't want to force you to criticize your own system as much, but what are some things you maybe do wish you saw more as UN youth delegates?
I think also looking into a question that you were answering or a bit asking a bit earlier. So what about the UN Youth Office? I think generally this question often boils down to this very specific aspect of funding. We can see that there is a lack of funding for youth involvement all over the place. So maybe in our national constituency, we're of course very hard, and we're very happy for every financial support we get from also Austrian ministries, or maybe in the international sphere, where we can see that the newly established UN Youth Office has not really gained a lot of extra funding comparing it to the UN Youth Envoy, of which it was established. But we can also see, and this is also very true for our national constituency, that the roles have been strengthened. So now there is an Under-Secretary General established with the UN Youth Office, which of course means that there is more formality and also hopefully a higher amount of influence. For us, it would be, for example, that we just now newly established a very good contact to our permanent mission in Nairobi. But we can see that close cooperation, really trying to be creating meetings and showcases every 3-4 months leads to them realizing how important and how we seriously take our youth commitment, and that we want to be implemented in every phase of the organizational process or the basic process of any draft. If you're looking a bit back to also where the views can very much follow, I do think that the main issues in Austria with some of the youth involvement is clearly the funding aspect. It's clearly also the role that young people get when, for example, invite politicians. But I hope that this is changing right now, and I do feel like some very positive trends are currently being established. And in this regard, one very good tip is if you have a national constituency which represents the whole youth in your country, to really cooperate with them a lot, because they are also, in a way, normally formalized, and with that, they have a lot of influence also in regards to politics, and that this makes organization easier. So back to the point of collaboration. But maybe Miriam always knows stuff which I tend to forget, so maybe she has a very good further insight in this regard.
Yeah, maybe to not take too much time, but I would love to shortly come back to the point Pitania mentioned about the youth delegate representations on a global scale, because what we can see is like most youth delegates are from the European Union and from the global north, and that's a big problem because I think it's not that good if you're, for example, in New York attending the UN General Assembly, and you can like kind of count the youth delegates that are not from the global north with 2 hands. And that's very unfortunate, because if we want to find solutions for young people and also bring young people to the table, it must be representative of the word youth. And that will not happen if you don't have more representation from the global south. And I really hope that this will change in the coming years. And I can see that there are efforts taken. For example, Germany, who funded last year a youth delegate program for 10 young people from Sudan. And they're now doing a new youth delegate program for more African countries this year, where they do the funding and support and work together with the countries. And I really hope that more countries from the global north will join this effort, so that we can bring more and more voices globally seen to the UN. Yes, that's it.
That's a really, really good point. You're almost sort of perpetuating that kind of north-south divide by having so many youth delegates there be able to speak, but then there's a lack of voices. I wasn't aware as much of the German program. So Matthew, I mean, sort of over to you now. You've been doing lots of projects on the UN impact level, maybe not through this system. Do you have any words for how you think the system is set up now? Are there ways it could engage people who aren't necessarily youth delegates better?
Definitely. I'd like to piggyback off of some of the other points that have been expressed. The first one, Tanya, you talked about youth washing. And that is something that, is a major issue. We are glad to see on the whole greater inclusion of young people in multilateral spaces. But there is always the concern that, youth washing is taking place. And so, I mean, I have been to sustainability or SDG oriented conferences where they tend to silo all the youth into one strand and then keep it separate from where, like, down the hall you have the law and governance strand that's taking place, or the sustainable finance strand that's taking place, and youth are kind of siloed in like the separate youth space, where it seems like we are just put there purely for like the optics. So there is some concern on that front, but so youth washing is a concern on that front. And I also want to talk a bit about what Miriam said. So in my personal experience, what I find is that majority of the people within these spaces, like myself, are people who are either from North America, if not Western Europe, or not East Asia. So it's maybe not so much of a ethnic or racial thing as much as just a geographic thing, where by nature of being in a certain country, you have the socioeconomic means to travel to events like these. Much like how the German Youth Delegate Program has to extend a helping hand to some of the other countries in the global South, and it's a major issue because it means that in these spaces, the youth that are being represented are disproportionately from a fewer and typically more affluent global regions. So yeah, these are some of the issues, but on the whole, we are glad to see more meaningful inclusion. Hopefully that trend will continue to rise. And then so speaking more from I would say I operate on the fringe of the UN system. I'm not quite in it, not quite out of it, just kind of on the edges. My sentiment is that for under 18 people, once again, the opportunities are there. They just take effort to find. One of the things our organization has done, MUN Impact, is last year, in 2021, we worked with One Shared World, another NGO, and the India Sanitation Coalition to consult with Indian youth from 4 major cities to draft a document that was then incorporated into a UN General Assembly resolution. I believe it's resolution like 70. It was during the 76th General Assembly, and it was the first time in history that language drafted by high schoolers, by young people, was able to be introduced into an actual resolution of the United Nations. So these opportunities do exist, but they take help from people within the UN system. Really need to extend a helping hand to willing youth who are outside the system. So it's really a two-pronged effort from both sides. You need passionate youth who want to get involved and who want to push their way into the space. And you also need people within the system who are willing to make space for youth to sit at the table. So that's sort of my take on it. But on the whole, like everyone else, I'm glad to see the gradual improvements.
No, definitely. Just to bring in sort of the MUN aspect here, it's very similar, I would say. MUN is still, I think, dominated by those who come from a more affluent socioeconomic background, despite the fact we're trying to sort of break those barriers down. And I'm glad your resolution worked well. I can announce we are working on an MUN resolution at the UN General Assembly level, which we are hoping to also do in collaboration with pretty much everyone who's tried to join here. So keep tabs on that. But next, I want to double down on that youth washing. What can we do to stop it happening? We as the people invited, because many times you can't just turn your back on a space that's been given, because that's almost feeling ungrateful for it. But at the same time, you don't want to be caught into it. Trusty, you mentioned, for example, how you are the unofficial youth person for your office because you're probably one of the youngest people there. That happens all over the place. What are some ways we can just say, no, I'm not going to be a face of it. I want impact. This is how I want it. Does anyone have any examples of where this came about, where you tried to push against this narrative? Miriam, do you want to add on that? Please, go ahead.
If it's okay, yes. I experienced that a lot during the first part of my mandate, especially because I started my mandate during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first 1.5 years for me were online. And I was often invited to join online meetings so that my name was standing there, and then it was tick the box. Austrian Youth was represented. So what I, for example, did to also kind of use the spaces and not sound insulting or ungrateful to the people that are offering me the spaces is when I'm invited to a conference or to take part in a UN conference as part of my delegation, I want to know that at least 1 or 2 months beforehand, so that I can talk with my permanent mission, ask them, what is it really about the conference? And also find out spaces I can get involved that, for example, even can be online, that you're writing a part of the speech of your ambassador, that you are allowed to give comments on the resolutions your country is negotiating, and that you're really kind of get included. And if you have 1 or 2 months beforehand, that also gives you time to yourself read the zero draft of a resolution, see the topics, and then consult young people that are directly affected by these topics in your own country and take their points, rephrase them so that they're kind of fitting into resolutions and bring that in your permanent mission. So I think what we're trying to do is to say, we would love to get involved. We would love to get the spaces. But when we get involved, we want to have it the same way as other people. And that means give us the time, let us be part of the space so that it's meaningful. And it worked kind of well. It was a long way to go. But now, after 1.5 years, I think we're at a point where it's improving.
Yeah. Sorry, please, Marvin, go ahead.
Final goal from my side is really what Miriam said. So if the spaces are so limited that only you can go, then if the spaces are so limited that only you can go, maybe you have the opportunity to collect voices to bring to these spaces. Even though you are the one representative who is only able to join, you might as well be able to foster it. And secondly, if you're lucky already in the organizational process, of course you can pinpoint towards saying, okay, another young people on this panel would be great, or another young person in that should be great. But if not, then during the conference, and this is something we of course always do, is take a moment to really think about the people who are definitely excluded from this process. We've been talking about the North-South divide, of the socio-economic divide, but there's also divides we've not been mentioning: gender divide, ethnicity divides, or just divides on potentially disability. So these are huge issues we are just pinpointing towards. And of course, you need to, in this moment, really be the person in the room who's also taking the unhappy looks, because you're pinpointing it, but it's 100% important.
Really good point. No, I really appreciate that. No one invites the first secretary of the mission a few days beforehand to a meeting. Why should we be invited a few days beforehand to a meeting? Did anyone else want to add on that? I love that sort of specific example as well. Does anyone else have examples of that they want to highlight? Maybe even Matthew as well, sort of ways you push. But yeah, Trassa, go ahead. Oh, sorry. That was your hand up?
Matthew wants to speak there, yeah. But if Matthew wants to go on there from a non-youth delegate perspective.
Please go ahead. I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Go to Matthew after.
I like the way Miriam gave the example of how she was probably invited to an event 3 days before, maybe. And you have to, last year I had an example where, and don't get me wrong, being the youth and usually the young person in the room, we and we're, as I said earlier, we're kind of the first generation of that youth coming in. Like before us, it was women, and coming up, the disability representation is currently a huge one, or in my world that I'm working in anyway. That's a huge one at the moment. We're working on trying to get more people with disabilities in, and more than just the physical disabilities, all kinds of them. I was taking notes as you were talking, but I have examples of times where I was asked, they were like, oh, we have this opportunity to come to a conference, told me 4 days before. But often they forget that I was working full time at the time, and I had to turn around to my boss and be like, well, can I please take a week off work? And she was like, are you for real? And I was like, yeah, I'm going abroad for a week if you don't mind. And only that my boss was an absolute champion of young people, and she fully believed in it. She was like, yeah, just, make sure nothing major. If something comes up, please be on hand. And I think as young people, we're often trying to juggle, one, being a young person and being given an amazing opportunity that you don't want to turn down, because there are so many other young people that would give an arm and a leg to be in the position we are. So there's that pressure. Then there's the pressure of either college or work and having to try and keep afloat because we don't get paid for doing these things. Whereas now in my position in the UN, I'm like still getting excited when I'm invited to something. I'm like, ooh, this is my job. And I'm not just like having to juggle another job and college on top of it all. So I think people often forget. And I think as youth, it's almost up to us to kind of, not obnoxiously or rudely, but like remind them and almost teach them how to work with young people. Like the way you were saying, Miriam, you asked them like, look, like I'm trying to juggle everything. I also have a job. I have a social life that I am attempting to keep alive. Can you please give us a bit of notice? And I think like last year, like they kind of got used to it, and they realized that I wasn't in education, that I was working as well, because usually most of the Irish youth delegates are in college when they do it. So I think we have to almost like bring the adults along with us and teach them on how to work with young people, because there are a few phenomenal champions in different agencies and embassies and missions and departments in the government and stuff. But we just need a couple more champions to believe in us and to know how to work with us properly.
That's really great. Really, really great point. Matthew, did you want to come in on that?
Okay, I'll just sprinkle in my 2 cents worth here. I definitely sympathize with the thought of with the feeling of being invited to things only like 2 to 3 days before. That has happened to me a couple times, and it's hard to say yes on a whim, with some of these things. But on the whole, like when it comes to resisting youth washing, I'll admit I haven't really had many instances where I feel like I stood up to an instance of youth washing. Half the time I'm just happy to be there, let's be real. But I will say this, it's very fortunate whenever we have allies, adults who are allies to youth, both over and under 18 youth, and are willing to advocate on our behalf. I'm very fortunate to have been around such individuals a couple times throughout life. So I'll just say, I'll take a second here to just appreciate those allies who do believe in youth inclusion and involvement. Thank you to you guys. Yeah,
it's a really, really great point. Yeah, I think Lisa is one of the great ones as well from MUN Impact. You're doing a great job on that. Britannia, I don't want to exclude you, of course. Anything else to add to that? Experiences you've had before on that? I think we've all mentioned how it's not just youth washing, it's the whole sort of intersectionality of it. We maybe almost unfortunately have to be voices for many others, which we shouldn't be, but we can be, and that's also a good thing. So maybe over to you on some of your beliefs of youth washing.
Yes, just really quick, since all of the things you've said is so spot on. I mean, everything from how we do this nonprofit actually, and we have full-time. I go to college full-time. I have friends who like do college and work, and then this on top of that. So often when we have to go on, or we get invited to conferences or meetings, we have to take days off, which we're not compensated for. And just even that, there you can see a difference between the adults in the conferences and then us youth people, how the voices there are not really paid the same and valued differently. And just to like talk about how the youth washing, since I'm new in my role, I haven't really experienced it yet, but I have had I have been in the civil society for a long time, and I remember in high school when, because one thing as youth, what we can do, what we know is we have another perspective, and we can look at what the older people say and do with kind of skepticism and critical. And I remember in high school when we were a bunch of people who were a bit skeptical of how the school led with regards to values and how they were teaching, and we tried to create an association, and they didn't let us. And they had a bunch of meetings with us all the time to just hear what we had to say, but then they never really acted on it. And then I remember once they were tired of us being very like critiquing them for not making or giving us any influence. They made us go from classroom to classroom and teach the teachers themselves how to do stuff instead of the school board taking the matters into own hands. So that was some kind of thing that they saw that we were critiquing the system, and they couldn't really deny it, but they didn't want to do the work themselves, and so they would let us do the work. And yeah, that was just one short experience.
Really, really fantastic. We haven't got too much time in the session, but I see questions in the chat. I'll co-opt one of them sort of into a question for you, and then we'll end maybe on a positive note after that. So there's a question about sort of being the bridge between individuals and their communities. I kind of want to ask you, how well did you feel as UN Youth delegates, or maybe just in your role, that you were being able to coordinate from the national, from the local level, all the way to the international? Or did you sometimes feel it was just sort of embassy to GA room, as it were? And, you know, I'm going to similarly work this with Matthew and others. How well do you feel connected to the local and the national around you when you're discussing internationally? Or do you think there's some issues and imbalances in that? Who maybe wants to come in first on that? I don't want to just throw back to the Austrian youth delegates here again, because you mentioned it first. But this actually comes also, I think, from your comment earlier, Miriam, about being, and Marvin, how you're trying to sort of coordinate nationals too. Maybe start with you on that.
Yeah, we would love to. I would say like it's actually for us too the most important part of the whole program, to kind of being the bridge between national youth and the UN. And it's kind of also the thing you should do. You should collect the visions, ideas, but also worries of young people all over your country. Bring that to UN level, but then also bring UN level back to the young people and make it understandable what you did. And I, for example, just as a little example, I always have a book with me when I'm meeting with young people, and I'm writing down what they said. I'm writing down an email address. Whenever I'm able, even if it's like half a year or even more later, to bring that into an UN process as soon as it's fitting in topic-wise, I'm writing them an email back and saying, hey, I brought there and there your topics in. If you have any questions or want to have a follow-up meeting on this specifically, please let me know. And for me, like it's, for example, especially important to reach marginalized youth, which means it's a lot of work. So you have to get active yourself. You have to reach out. I was at projects for young people who weren't able to find a job, at youth mental health institutions, and so on, at institutions that help, for example, young people who can't hear. So like, it's really important to get active yourself and feel as part of the community. But on the other side, we also have to be realistic, because, for example, in Austria, we represent all youth between 0 and 30 years. That's nearly 3 million young people, which means you are never able, and you should never tell anyone that you're representing all young people in Austria, because that would be just wrong. But you can go to UN level and talk with people and, for example, tell them, oh, this topic is perfect because last week I exactly talked on this topic with this and this youth group, and that is what they gave me and said it is important, and that is what essentially is also important to other youth groups in Austria. So it's also really important to be realistic and not kind of give about the feeling to other people that you're able to represent all young people, but show that you try. And yeah.
Thank you.
So
That's it.
Okay.
I think it's, one thing that we're trying to do is to bring the SDGs also to young people. So uploading their ideas, visions and downloading the UN agenda, bringing that back into the workshops that we're creating, and really trying to also reach these groups that also Matthew has been talking about. So especially the group between 14 and 18 is sometimes so overlooked, whilst they have so much professionalism in their work. They can definitely directly work on draft resolutions. They could draft, as Matthew, you have done in your work, a clear example of how good these young people are and working extremely professionally, but they're unfortunately so often excluded because when you're in university, you have your set themes, you are, of course, more and more an expert in your certain role. So really focusing also on these age groups. And a concrete example, I had, for example, a workshop on SDGs with elementary school children. And it was still, for me, taking away so many things that young people, and especially these super young people, have realized about the world. They see what is wrong with our world, and they really want stuff to change. And once you realize that this diversity of young people and that are trying really to upload also their agendas, and you can follow up on that, is really when you try to connect the regional to the national and to the global level.
Thank you very much. Really interesting examples there, especially from the Austrian perspective. Britannia, I want to come to you on that. I think you work quite closely with the National Youth Council as part of your work as UN Youth Delegate. Do you find explicit difficulties in sort of translating, as Marvin said, uploading and downloading kind of the agenda?
Yeah, so how we're doing it, I haven't really started yet, but it's what I've heard. We hold consultations with, so I work closely with the National Youth Organization, and then they have branched down different organizations on the local level, right? So we have consultations with those organizations, and then we bring that up to the national and UN areas. What I heard is hard to do is actually just finding the people, getting them to want to come to the consultation and talk to us. The easy stuff has been reporting it back, actually, since that's but that's just we post it on our social medias or send letters to them where we, on our own words, write down what has been said and what has been done. The hardest part is actually to set up these consultations with these local grassroots organizations, actually, and getting them to want to be a part of it. I don't really know why it's hard to do that, and that's something we're working on and trying to do better. So it's, as Miriam said, it's very hard to represent such a big amount. Like, youths are like half the population in Sweden, and it's so hard to represent every one of them and get all of their experiences. But I mean, I think we're having a great start, and as we have been saying, just getting a seat at the table and just being able to represent some of the voices, it's amazing, actually. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm going to go almost a little bit against what Miriam said earlier, because she said, you can't represent all 3 million. Well, Matthew, you're representing 1.3 billion adolescents, right? That's how this works. Maybe sort of on your perspective there, obviously it's a joke, but also sort of for those who maybe aren't really being given as much of a chance to engage at all at the sort of national level. Maybe once you're an adult, once you're past 18, you're made more aware you can vote, which, obviously you can't necessarily under 18. That's quite a big point. What are some ways that you have tried to engage internationally, really, the national?
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to exercising my right to vote.
In the US especially.
Yes. Well, I'm not a citizen yet, but yeah, when that day comes, I will be very happy to do so. So okay, I will say this personally. The context here. Growing up, my family kind of moved around a lot, so I'm not very particularly plugged into my local or my international, my national, like US or Texas or Austin. I'm not really plugged into my youth network there. But what I will say is, throughout my work with MUN Impact, that is the constituency I represent. The network of over like 600 youth that actively engage with MUN Impact throughout the whole world, high school, middle school, and university. That is the constituency I've represented for like the past 1.5 years. And so to that end, I want to kind of piggyback off of what Miriam said. Following up is so important. You know, in our role as, I guess, leaders, representatives, having the heart and the dedication to follow up with people in your constituency, people who look to you for leadership, for representation, that is absolutely crucial. And I will say, as someone who has to balance a million exams, college applications, and stuff like that, I haven't been the best at this. There have been moments where I've personally failed to follow up with individuals, but it is something I strive to do, you know, in my role and capacity. That whenever someone needs, say, you know, someone needs like, okay, so like someone was drafting a document and wanted someone with more experience to have a look over it, you know, it is my role as the representative to be able to ensure that that request is met, you know, to be able to ensure that people within the organization who are doing the day-to-day work, who are doing the email sending, who are doing the workshops with schools, to make sure their voice and their opinions is being heard at like the leadership level, or that the great work that they do is being advertised and spoken of when I do events like these, you know, where I'm like here with people not from MUN Impact and explaining what we do as an organization. So just want to reemphasize that following up aspect of our roles as leaders and representatives is absolutely crucial. And yeah, that's all I really have to say.
Thanks very much. And Trust, I do want to give you a chance here. So please, maybe from the perspective of Ireland, how did you find the challenge, really, which it is a challenge, to try and keep all of those constituencies in mind?
So I think, sorry, I agree with what everyone is saying, and often the challenges that come with it. But I think people like Model UN are the bridge between individuals and communities. If it's Model UN, if it's, because I'm come from very, very rural Ireland. I'm from an offshore island off of Ireland.
Oh,
so
wow.
that I'm like very big into the local and like trying to bring people along, and that whole thing of leading the ladder behind you. Because I'm a bit of an oddball at home. I like jump in. My community is very, very supportive because it's such a small community. They can't really be picky about what age you are because there just isn't enough population to be picky. So I was the weirdo at like 18. I joined the board of the co-op at home. I think I brought the average age down by about 50 years when I joined it. But they were delighted to have me. They were like, fantastic. Oh, great. Someone's actually interested in development of the island. And it kind of showed that other young people that I've grown up with at home that like actually you can join the board even if it is just a load of older people, and it's great, like get involved. And then I think like mine kind of just escalated because I was so supported within my community, and through that like through the board of the co-op I was kind of introduced to that kind of sphere of like meeting politicians and meeting council members, and then I ended up at an event in Brussels with the board. So I think often just like pushing into those spaces, that does bridge the gap between individuals and organizations. And again, getting involved, if you are involved in Model UN, or if it's the Rural Youth Project or MGCY or any of them, National Youth Council, or we have like these local ones in Ireland called Corlin and Og, which is they're kind of like individual youth councils. Corlin and Og literally stands for youth council, but we have them in like different communities around the country, which is a really cool way to kind of like slowly but surely build your way up. And I think also that thing of when you're starting off, you don't have to jump straight into the UN if you don't want to, because it is intimidating, UN or nationally. Like start small and you'll slowly but surely build it up. But as you're going, make sure you bring the people behind and inform everyone at home. Inform the people who don't necessarily know about it, but they mightn't tell you, but they are actually probably interested. But it's a little bit intimidating, because when people see you doing events like this, they're like, oh, well, I don't have an opinion. And you're like, actually, you do. You do have a voice. I think it was Marvin mentioned earlier about the story again. That's so important, to be empowered to know that you have that. And then you can break the barriers and carry your way up. Sorry, I think I went off a bit of a tangent there.
No worries. I can promise we did not pay you to say MUN, but that is true. It's all the
But it is
background, I guess.
important.
It's one
It's
way.
important.
It's one way.
Organizations like you guys teach the skills of how to speak up, how to get involved like this. And as I said, I wish I knew about it earlier.
I'm same here, honestly. I only started at uni, and I think I've been evidently addicted ever since. This has been a really amazing debate. I've been loving every second of it, and I hope all of our audience here and across the world have been too. We're gonna have to wrap it up though, and like everything, and I think people are bored of me saying this, I like to end these on a positive note. So the question really is, what is something that you're excited and looking forward to? Something that's coming in the future that you are just raring to go for, that you're looking forward to. Doesn't have to be about MUN or the UN in particular, although if it has an international dimension, it would be good. But I think I'd just like to end this really, and indeed this whole summit, on a positive note from some young people who've gotten involved and continually will. I'll do this in the order we started our sort of opening interventions with. So Britannia, then Matthew, Trasa, and then Miriam and Marvin. So Britannia, over to you to start. No pressure here. But this is inspirational. So we'll keep those vibes going.
Yes. So just to like get a bit of background, this Tuesday and Wednesday I actually met with Miriam and Marvin. They are in Sweden right now, so we were at
really?
the SDN conference.
Right now as well.
Yes.
Should have all joined from the same one, you know.
We should have, but they're in Stockholm and I'm in Uppsala, unfortunately. But yeah, so that was such an amazing thing for me actually, since this is my first time meeting other youth delegates from other countries. So I mean, that's something I'm very looking forward to. And right now, I don't really know exactly what stuff I can go to and cannot go to, since I'm not really sure with the funding. But the HLPF is must. So I have to say that's something I'm very looking forward to. And what I knew even before meeting Miriam and Marvin was that I knew that one of the things I really wanted or really looked forward to was just this in-person meetings with other young people from different parts of the world, since we have something that connects us all, and that's just our pure engagement and expertise. So that's something. And just, I know you said international, but I have to say that there's like a 1 week conference thing in Gotland in Sweden, which is an island in Sweden. And that's something I just adore, since it's in an island, beautiful island during the summer. And then you just meet politicians and everybody walks around and eats ice cream and talk politics. So I mean, that's something I'm also looking forward to.
That does sound fun. Send us all an invite. Matthew, yeah. if we can. Matthew, please, over to you.
Okay, I'm gonna jump on with something a little more boring. So personally, year-end exams are 2 months away from me, so I'm very tunnel visioned right now and just studying and gearing up and getting through my final year of high school. So I will say, for the past few months, I've had to set my youth delegate hat aside and just keep my head down, studying. But I will say though, personally, I am looking. I feel that now that all the energy from youth, especially the under 18 crowd, has really grown. And there's a lot of energy and desire to want to participate in meaningful policymaking and sustainability-oriented spaces. I feel that as I age out of that 18 and under category and start studying in college to really specialize in a particular domain, mine is economics, my hope is that I can kind of give back. So through my more in-depth study, I can kind of give back my increasing knowledge and skills to the under 18 crowd to help them better interact with some of these policy issues, especially in America, where, you know, the political environment it's explosive, but in some ways good ways, in some ways a bad way. So I'm happy to try and contribute in that way as I look ahead to university.
That's really great. We've all been there, Matthew. We've all been there. And honestly, I think I have to say the exams to get to uni were harder than uni. I have to admit. I don't know if others disagree with me on that, but you're almost there. Just stick with the grind. Trasha, over to you.
I think for me, what I'm looking forward to is I'm just over halfway through my contract in Fiji. And I think looking at that over the next couple of months, I went on a work trip to Tuvalu last week and it was phenomenal. Really, really enjoyed it. When I was over there, I took the opportunity to conduct a youth dialogue or a youth dialogue consultation because we were over there for consultation. So I kind of took it into my own hands. I was like, right, I'm going to do one on youth. I was like, I want to hear what their opinion on these policies are. My boss was like, okay, help yourself. And I think over the next coming months, as we're continuing to do these consultations, just because of the particular project we're working on, I'm really looking forward to. I've kind of taken it on now that I'm going to hopefully do one in each of the 5 countries, because we were talking about how so many of the developing countries in Global South aren't represented. And I think it's so important that from my experience being a youth delegate, I know the power and how amazing it has been being involved in this area, but some people actually just don't know. And definitely I'll add Model UN now to my list of potential opportunities and also just ways of how to get involved, because I just get the same questions like, how do I do it? Where do I start? So I'm looking forward to that over the next couple of months. So hopefully having more chats and more consultations with young people from the other islands, Pacific Islands.
We'd love to work with you on this as well. I think that's something the MUNers Cross Borders would like. So if you,
Definitely.
we'll get in contact after regarding sort of links and things we can share, and we'll work on that. So thank you very much. And last but no means least, thank you again, Miriam and Marvin. I don't know which of you can speak first or last, but you can make it more dramatic if you'd like by.
Please, I mean, sorry for really stressing out this part with being dramatic, but I think when we are encouraged to say positive things, let's also stick to what we really are facing currently. And when we look at the SDG agenda, we see that only 30 indicators are on track out of 170. We see that we are not going to reach the 1.5 degree goals because we're on 1.2 already. And we can see that currently not a lot is changing in policy making, even though, we can celebrate the UN Youth Office being established. So sorry for having to.
Thanks for the depressing bit there. Thanks for the depression, Marvin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but now getting to the positive part. Yeah, sorry.
No, I agree.
No, I think, and this is really what also brings me out of these holes, because it is just this way that we sometimes feel depressed about these huge global challenges we're facing, and we young people are suddenly tasked to deal with because no one else apparently is looking at them, or profits are more important. And I think the hope, and this is what positively primes me, is that whenever I do stuff like this, for example, where young people come together, they have organized something and they're realizing something because they want to stand for something, is where I get hope from. I get hope from when I see on the news that young people have collaborated to take direct action against climate change. Maybe it's be protesting, for example, in Germany, in Austria, maybe this be fighting against Lützerath or in Vienna, going on the streets and protesting. I must honestly say, these are the things which gave me hope for the future, and these are the things I'm always looking forward to. And this is why my last sentence is an invitation for anyone who's watching, who wants to collaborate in any form. If you have a project you want to do, and we can be, or I can be of any help, please feel free to reach out. I hope you find me somewhere in this internet. And yeah, we need to work, honestly, and it's really depressing, but it is the truth. So let's stay hopeful in collaboration.
Thank you so much.
And to take up on that, now the bit more positive phrased part from me. But Marvin told you about like how he's motivated by being at events like this when young people are getting engaged and are hopeful and helping and standing up. And I also did that when I was younger, but I started way too late, in my opinion, and I would have loved to have.
There's no such thing as too late. No such thing as too late.
Yes, but I nevertheless would have loved adults who would have supported me way earlier to do that. And when I see my future, I'm becoming a teacher. And I really hope that I can use what I know now to teach, but also tackle the traditional teaching system and bring in learning for societal impact and like support and push the young people I hopefully have in my classroom in a few years. to do the same and to be the best they can be and as early as possible. So be inspired by the world around you, try to explore it, and take up the help you can get. So as Marvin said, always reach out to every one of us. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Betania, Matthew, Teresa, Miriam, and Marvin for joining us at this closing ceremony, discussing what can youth do. And I think we could do quite a lot. So I think on that note, it is time to end the MUNers Across Borders 2023 Summit. It's been 21 sessions, 50 speakers, including this summer, we had over 1,000 people engaged across our events. And this is just the beginning. So make sure to check out all of the recordings for the sessions, to follow all of these wonderful people and all of the speakers we've had across the 50 days. And with that, in my power as director, I now do declare the summit closed. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and in our case, evening, deep evening. And we will see you all across the year and in 2024. Bye, everyone.